Greetings and welcome to the first episode of Oblivion Modding Showcases, a new series dedicated to showing off 10 new Oblivion mods for your viewing pleasure every other week. I'm your host, Dark Elf Guy, and as this is the first episode, I suppose I should explain a few things about how this will work. With this series, we'll be looking at 10 different Oblivion mods in 10 different categories every other week, with a themed episode every other episode, and you'll find that you can use the menu here or the timestamps down below in the video description to easily navigate through all the mods in each of these videos. Now, if you have any suggestions for Oblivion mods you'd like to see covered in future episodes, please do post them below in the comments or check out our various forum threads. And in any event, most of you who know me from Oblivion Modding Showcases will no doubt be familiar with this format, and no worries, episode 42 of Oblivion Modding Showcases is being worked on and that'll be released momentarily. For those of you who are new though, I hope you'll find this an easy enough format to get used to and follow, though I'm of course open to any suggestions you might have for improvement. Now then, you'll find download links for each mod shown here down in the description below, so why don't we go ahead and get started with our popular mod of the week, which this week is Ariel's Retreat by Lance4791. As soon as you start the game with this mod, you'll find a new book in your inventory with a rather detailed story about Ariel's Retreat, and obviously we're not going to show the whole book here, but it is quite long, coming in at around 75 endgame pages, complete with screenshots and a spell that'll let you summon a portal to Ariel's Retreat and whatever location you happen to be at, and you can use this to access this new realm. Now, Ariel's Retreat is basically a large landmass mod in its own world space, and this will probably remind you a bit of the Paradise Realm from Oblivion's main quest. It's a beautiful land full of scenic sights to see, with arid ruins marking the pass between the meadows and woodlands that dot the landscape, and it really is all quite pretty and, well, I'm going to be using this word a lot, beautiful, and it's probably safe to say that the landscape is one of Ariel Retreat's main features. There's obviously been a lot of care with crafting an amazing environment for the player to explore. Besides just the landscape though, there's also a ton of things to find out here in the wilderness, such as this lone shop here, which is home to a single merchant that sells, I believe, books and other tomes. And you'll also find a new town in this hauntingly beautiful realm, and it's a sort of small village out on the water with a wide variety of shops, each with some pretty cool custom signs, as you can probably see here. And it's a sort of cool ramshackle-like town with a bit of a shipwreck theme, as you can probably notice with that shipwreck there in the background that's just sort of barely visible between the buildings. And naturally, this town is home to a number of merchants who sell just about every type of item you could need or want, such as food here in this tavern, or weapons and armor, clothing, miscellaneous goods, jewelry, and pretty much anything else you could possibly need. And Ariel's Retreat is really a very tranquil environment, with many paths to explore that you can walk down amongst absolutely stunning and peaceful settings that'll make you want to slow down and just appreciate the natural beauty here. And there's plenty of hidden getaways where you can just sit and relax to the sight of amazing landmarks, like this overlook that provides an epic view of these nearby waterfalls, which is really just something to behold. You also find that this new realm contains something of a player home for you to use, such as this Temple of the Tides, which comes equipped with spell-making and enchanting altars, as well as many other features, such as a bedroom and guest bedrooms that you can use for player companions. And there's obviously a master bedroom that you can use for yourself that's just wonderfully decorated. And it's just a nice place to stop and relax if you should so desire. And there's also an alchemy lab with an ingredient storage and sorting device, as you can see here. And also a library where you can store and display goods, and there's some more storage and the like down below in the cellar. And these can hold any number of items. I believe Oblivion has pretty much unlimited storage with its containers, so that's not too big of a surprise. But not everything is just scenic landscapes and pretty homes though. There's also a handful of dungeons for you to delve through, though they're still pretty impressive looking with a lot of that same scenic beauty that you'll find in the landscape. Not to mention there's quite a lot of interesting new artwork decorating the walls of this apparent dungeon, and this place is just pretty massive, it has to be said. Of course, like any dungeon, there's a little bit of combat here, as you're going to see here in a minute. But really, you just gotta appreciate the sheer amount of detail that's gone into decorating this one single dungeon, And here's that combat I mentioned just a second ago. This place is protected by a legion of Duelist Centurions, and these are actually pretty tough opponents. You'll need to be around level 20 or so to face their onslaught and survive. I don't think low level characters really have much of a chance against them, unless you just run past them like what I did. But in any event, Ariel's Retreat is a realm that's divided into a number of different islands or sub-realms, with portals to each that you'll find scattered about, leading to different locations with lots of that same scenic beauty. And gosh, I can't get enough of this amazing landscape here. There's just so many cool things about it that make you want to just casually explore and take it all in. And it should be mentioned that unlike vanilla Oblivion, you won't have to constantly run for your life or fight various woodland creatures here in order to survive, because Ariel's Retreat doesn't have any hostile creatures whatsoever. That's actually something that annoyed me a lot about Oblivion, and also Morrowind for that matter. I could never take my time and enjoy the landscape without being harassed every 5 feet, but luckily you can just take in the scenery here without any major obstacles. And you can see some more of that amazing scenery here. There's just so much cool stuff. You've got rivers, waterfalls, scenic forests, some Asian-themed gardens, as you can sort of see here, and there's just amazing giant pillars of stone as well. Not that there aren't any obstacles at all, however. If you so desire, you can actually find some creature summoning platforms, and you can use these to summon creatures to fight at your leisure instead of just randomly in the wilderness. Anyway, I've only shown a small fraction of the total stuff you'll find in Ariel's Retreat here, and needless to say, there's a ton of content here. I highly recommend you check it out. I could spend all day trying to convince you of this amazing scenery, but we do have other showcases to get to, so I'm just going to leave off here. Which brings me to our house mod of the week, and this week we have Cadbury Castle by GG. This mod gets off to a rather amusing start when you discover that you've accidentally married the Countess of Cadbury, essentially marrying into wealth and a fancy new home. And what a home it is! Cadbury Castle is a magnificent shoreside castle of warm, sandy stonework, which gives it a rather unique appearance, and it sits right along the Nibbin Bay, right across the way from the city of Breville. Like any harbour-based castle, there's a number of ships at port, and there's also a small gathering of buildings right near the castle gates, including a small chapel and also a crypt. And you'll also find a county market nearby, with a wide range of vendors set up to provide goods of any and all sorts, from food with a baker's stand and a butcher's stall, to textiles, books, magical spells, weapons, and also armor. You'll really find it all at the Cadbury Fairgrounds. And needless to say, you'll never want for having to find vendors ever again. There's just so many of them right here, and it's just extremely convenient. And there's also a pretty unique shop set up right near the harbour with a number of goods, and a pretty cool feature here is that you can actually look out the interior windows and see the exterior world space, so it really feels like it's connected to the world. And of course it also has a number of goods for sale, as you can see here. As for the castle itself, you'll naturally find a rather lovely courtyard with a number of small gardens and fountains that make for a nice entryway for visitors and residents alike. And I believe you can actually find a few stone benches in this particular fountain in case you just want to sit in the fountain and relax. Now, the interior of the castle itself is pretty much the definition of luxury and wealth, from a fanciful fountain that'll give you plenty of nice spell effects, to a fountain over here that just literally spawns wealth, from gold coins to diamonds and other precious gems. And, you know, just truth be told, I could probably watch this all day without getting bored. There's just something about the tinkle-tinkle sound of wealth that I find oh so appealing. But aside from the fountains, you'll also find a lot of expensive dishware, like you'll see in this cabinet here, because of course you can't just dine with everyday utensils now. And you'll also naturally find a throne room with seats for both yourself and your newfound accidental spouse, where the two of you can rule over the commoner class with an iron fist, or a rather golden fist. And besides exuberant wealth, Cadbury Castle also contains a pretty robust laboratory for you to work in with alchemical equipment, a cozy fireplace, and also altars of spellmaking and chanting hidden away in a small attic-like space. You'll even find a rather impressive looking library, complete with stacks and stacks of bookshelves, some aquariums with lots of tiny fish that are just swimming around there, and also this funny looking demonic librarian fellow, who certainly looks very trustworthy, I have to say. Among some of the other traditional castle rooms, you also find a large banquet and dining hall capable of seating a number of guests that you can have over for dinner or have a dinner party which will almost certainly end horribly since this is the Elder Scrolls universe we're talking about here. Those of you who watch Morrowind Modding Showcases already know my opinion about Elder Scrolls dinner parties. But anyway, where there's a dining room, there's also a kitchen, and Cadbury Castle has an absolutely lovely and rather creatively designed kitchen, as you can see here, with tons of food, a working sink, and also ovens to complete the picture. Naturally, there's a master bedroom as well, to be shared between yourself and the Countess, with a number of windows looking out onto the courtyard, and areas for painting, a hot tub for relaxing, even a grand piano should you happen to be of a more musical bent, and of course a shared bed for you and your spouse, as well as lounging areas and really all the other amenities that one requires in a master bedroom. You also find a bathroom attached to your suit, with a sauna that has a number of positive spell effects on your character, and of course the bathroom itself, which is just a lovely design with working faucets, a working shower, even a working toilet that you can flush, and really there's just all these amazing details in this house mod that I just really enjoy, and there's all of this and much more in Cadbury Castle that you can check out. This week's gameplay mod of the week is Betty's Junk and Sampan Mounts by Betty. With this mod, you'll find that you now have access to 2 new spells that allow you to summon 2 different types of water vehicles, such as a junk, as you can see here, and these basically act as mounts, only obviously on water instead of land. You control the ship from the top level, as you can see here, and you can just sort of sail around the lakes, rivers, and oceans of Cyrodiil as you please, and obviously these can vary in speed a little bit. This larger vessel is a bit slower than the other vehicle we're going to be showing, and just to give you a closer look at this particular ship model in a different environment, you can see my character navigating one of these ships over near the Anvil Bay region with a few NPCs that are also equipped with their own ships, and obviously this is a pretty Southeastern Asian influenced ship design. And here you can see the second ship that I've summoned, a much smaller vessel that's basically the size of a rowboat or possibly a small fishing rig, and again obviously heavily influenced in design from Southeast Asia. And this is a sort of faster, more easy to navigate vessel, particularly good for Cyrodiil's rivers, I would think. And with this mod you can finally explore Cyrodiil in a sort of different manner and take advantage of all those docks and waterways that you just see everywhere, actually parking your boat off of a dock to go exploring at a new location instead of just traversing the wilderness at random. Certainly a fun mod for exploring and role-playing if you're into that sort of thing. Next up we have our Town mod of the week, and this week we have Settlements of Cyrodiil Orenstad Township by Imhan123. This mod, which is part of a larger project to add more settlements and towns to the sparsely populated landscapes of Cyrodiil, adds the small town of Orenstad along the road to Skinnigrad in the middle of Cyrodiil's Great Forest region, and it's a rather scenic little town if I do say so myself, composed of a poor district of shacks at the base of the town's hill, with the main shops and more upper-class residences occupying the upper slopes and top of the hill along the town's main thoroughfare. And there's a lot of nice little geographical features here as well, such as a small pond and park-like area here at the top of the hill, with a small creek that leads back into the forest a ways, and it's all very peaceful like that you can just sort of walk around and enjoy. And there's also a small stables area, like you might expect in a small village like this. And there's also a couple of farms where residents harvest crops and food for the local population, as you can see back here. And I just have to say that I love how this is all just sort of nestled in among the trees of the forest here. The town really does fit in quite well with the surrounding landscape, at least in my opinion. And as you might expect, there's a lot of small stores here, such as a butcher's shop, which uses some new modest resources, I believe. And obviously this is where you can buy an assortment of smoked meats here if you so desire, or raw meat products if that's what you're into. And there's also a number of other small shops, as you might expect, such as a small alchemy shop with a number of ingredients, potions, brews, and more of that like, that you can just sort of purchase without having to hightail it to one of the bigger towns just to get a simple health potion of some kind, which is always a bit of a nuisance. And something that I should probably mention is that the town has complete NPC schedules. You'll see NPCs walking about on their day-to-day business or traveling out of town along a new path that leads to a small pre-existing chapel from vanilla Oblivion back here in the woodlands. And it really is just a very charming town to visit, and I think there's even plans to add a player home at some point as well. But moving right along with our items mod of the week this week, we're taking a look at Legends of Azeroth Armory by Alamarus. This is actually sort of a quest mod with a quest that you'll get from investigating the crazy paranoid suspicions of everyone's favorite lunatic elf, and this will eventually lead you to a dungeon where you'll find the majority of new items added by this mod. Though to avoid spoilers, I won't be showing much of this dungeon here, just suffice to say, you'll have some pretty tough battles ahead of you, involving rich mud crabs that might remind you of a fan favorite Morrowind character. But in any event, the real meat of this mod is a ton of new weapons and armors, and I'm going to show off a few of these here, though there's quite a few I won't be showing in this showcase. Anyway, this first suit of armor we're looking at is a sort of heavy Dark Lord type armor, and you can see some of the new weapons here as well, and this is a pretty impressive, albeit imposing set of armor that almost any evilly inclined character would probably love to own, and you can also see a retexture of it with a bit of a green outline here as well. And the third armor set we're looking at is my personal favorite. It's called Stalker Armor, which is meant, I believe, for lighter type characters. And it's a pretty crisp, dark armor with some purple streaks, as you can see here. And this new long blade my character is wielding is called Frostmourne, I believe. It's a very impressive looking blade that would definitely strike fear into your foes. And speaking of impressive weapons, you'll also find a set of Royal Greaves that may or may not have been inspired, well, definitely were inspired by the Warcraft universe. I mean, consider the name of the mod, for example. But they're pretty cool looking nonetheless. And next up is a sort of butterfly blade, and you'll also notice a pretty neat looking cape that my character is wearing as well. And in total there's a ton of new weapons that are added by this mod, but I'm just going to leave off here so that you guys can enjoy finding these weapons in game for yourselves. This week's quest of the week is The Underking, A Tortured Soul by Demon Lord 7654. While perusing the various books and tomewares at the bookshop in Coral, you'll find a curious journal added by this mod that'll spark a series of quests involving Zirian Octus, the Underking, and I do apologize if I mispronounce that name. And these books also go into the Numidium a little bit as well. And you start out this quest with just a simple journal written by someone who came across the series Atones by Zirian Octus, and this will eventually lead you to the author's house, which has mysteriously been overrun by the undead. And as you clear the place out, you'll have to search around for clues amongst the wreckage. And you'll notice that I'm using Creature Diversity by Zaldir alongside this mod. And in any event, you'll eventually stumble upon the attic and the next set of clues that'll lead you off in search of the rest of the books by Zirian Octus. And from here on out, this is primarily a dungeon delving mod, if I'm being honest, with numerous new caves and tombs for you to delve through as you try to collect the pieces of the puzzle, and of course this means fighting more and more undead. This isn't an easy mod by any stretch of the imagination, but most players at about level 10 or so will be able to complete it just fine. And these are some fairly large dungeons, I have to say, consisting of a number of tunnels, arid ruins, caverns, and large chambers to work your way through. And this mod will probably take you around, I'm guessing, 5 hours or so to complete all the way, at least as a rough estimate. But anyway, this is essentially a long quest series handled in the traditional written book form rather than the spoken NPC form. And there's a lot to be discovered about the Underking should you fall through to the end, but I'm just going to leave off here since I'd rather not spoil the whole quest mod for you, and you'll notice I've been saying that a lot, and really the purpose of these showcases is just to give you a taste to sort of whet your appetite for these mods, and not really to spoil them wholesale. Next up is our Landmass Mod of the week, and this week we have Valenwood Islands by Envy Developer, Windsurfer, and many others as well. And this mod starts out simply enough. You'll buy a ticket for a ship ride to Valenwood near the city of Anvil, and pretty soon you'll find yourself on a ship out at sea about to make way for Valenwood. But before you go, you'll find you'll actually be able to talk with your fellow shipmates first, many of whom have fairly detailed background stories, like this Dark Elf who's from the Armoon Ashlands back on the Morrowind mainland, which by the way is a real place you can visit if you have Tamari built for Morrowind. And we also did a trailer for the Armoon Ashlands actually not too long ago, though I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. In any event, you'll eventually make your way down below decks and find your cot for the journey. But as you might expect with ship rides like this, everything isn't quite as it seems, and you'll wake up to find that the ship is sinking and you'll have to act quickly to abandon the vessel. And you'll also meet one of your shipmate companions on your way out. And after a curious series of events, you'll eventually wake up upon the shores of these Valenwood Islands, shipwrecked and without a way off the islands at all, and this will start off a series of quests with your shipmates to find the best way to get back to civilization, though they have some differing ideas on what to do exactly. And again, there's just a lot of dialogue here that you'll find, though none of it is spoken at the moment. And the first island you land on is really a pretty small one, little more than a desert isle with a narrow sliver of tropical jungles, as you can see here. Now you might come across a handful of dangerous new critters that have been added in by this mod, such as those spiders you just saw, but in any event, pretty soon you'll come across some larger neighbor islands with a bit more diversity, with sandy beaches and again jungles, but also a small village with a number of curious huts and the like, with a rather Bosma type design to them, and it's a rather scenic looking village with a small stream running through it. But pretty soon, as it turns out, the local residents don't much like strangers lurking through their jungles, so they'll accost you and escort you to see their leader. And if you haven't quite figured this out yet, this is a very story-driven landmass mod with lots of quests and mysteries for you to solve amongst the local residents. And here you can see the main village on the island, and some of you are probably wondering why these buildings look so familiar. That's because they're actually originally from a Morrowind mod way back in the early days of Morrowind modding during 2002 and 2003. There was a project called Nadib that was a really massive, ambitious landmass project to add a home for the Wood Elves in Morrowind. And many of these assets were actually created for that project, though it was abandoned by 2004, and many of the assets actually ended up being featured in dozens of other mods, such as Sea of Destiny, and of course this one, where the models appear to have been ported in and updated to better match the Oblivion engine. Though I do have to apologize for the lengthy history lesson here. I do find modding history to be a rather fascinating subject, and how all these models are still being used after, well, long after a decade after they were originally designed is just really interesting to me. But in any event, there's a ton of content here, in part thanks to the storytelling skills of Envy Developer, a modder who has proven their writing skills time and time again in the Morrowind modding community, and who tells a great story here as well. Needless to say though, there's also a few services on the island, like this tavern, and I have to say that I really love these interior designs here, which are for the most part quite atmospheric. And I just sort of love the mixture of foliage and plants and butterflies with the interior design in this tavern. It really just sort of embodies for me what I imagine when I think of Bosmiri dwellings, which is very nature focused. But anyway, moving on with our NPC Mod of the Week this week, we have Emma's classic Children of Cyrodiil. Now, for those of you familiar with Children of Morrowind, this is pretty much the exact same thing, only obviously in Oblivion. You'll now find children littering the streets of Cyrodiil and causing all sorts of ruckus with their laughing, their playing around, and general other nonsense. Darn kids, why don't you get out of my field of vision? Not to sound like a curmudgeon anyway, though I certainly kind of feel like it sometimes. But in all seriousness, you can find children engaged in a number of different activities, and just like regular NPCs, they have their own schedules, and they'll go about doing their own sort of daily routines. And just like in Children of Morrowind, you can also give these kids presents, so there's not a whole lot of benefit to doing so, it's just something nice you can do to prove you're cool and hip in their eyes. I mean, what are you looking at, child? You just want a toy for existing? Why, back in my day, we had to take a sword and carve our own toys out of tree trunks. I swear, this ungrateful generation. But anyway, really, all kidding aside, you can also play games with some of these children, like Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is just a sort of randomly generated game where you can pick rock, paper, or scissors and have a random chance at winning. There's not really a whole lot of depth to it. I mean, these are children we're talking about here. And it's not like if you do win, the kids will actually give you anything for winning. Silly children, they're kind of like gambling machines. You keep on playing and playing, but they don't actually give you anything in return. But in any event, many of the characters in Oblivion now have children of their own, and you often find them hanging out with their kids, doing the same activities, like this girl who's painting like her mother. And of course, you'll also find a number of new items scattered around the world, like at these shops where you can now buy children's toys such as dolls and teddy bears and things like that. And you also find children outside city walls, perhaps riding along on their ponies, or otherwise enjoying themselves with mundane activities. And you even find that some households in Cyrodiil will now have infants, though you can't really interact with these at all. And anyway, this is just a great mod if you've missed the sound and sights of bothersome children in your games of Oblivion. This week's new meshes and textures mod of the week is Shadenhall Retexture by Logan. This mod is, as you can probably imagine, a complete retexture of the buildings and architecture of the city of Shadenhall, and as many of you from both the Oblivion and Morrowind modding communities will know, Logan is a very talented texture artist, and obviously this mod does not disappoint. You'll find that Shadenhall now has some nice, crisp and clean looking textures applied to the buildings, shops, and manors of this easternmost city of Cyrodiil. And just sort of taking a look at these textures under a different light setting, with the sort of noon to early afternoon sunlight, you can really tell that they're definitely an improvement from vanilla Oblivion, with nice whitewashed walls and these nice plaster textures here, and fairly dynamic looking stone walls with these lovely cobblestone style that we've just come to associate so much with the beautiful town of Shadenhall. And of course there's also new textures for the wood pillars of the buildings and the roof tilings, as you might expect. And also there's new textures which are especially evident on the town's new wooden bridges, which just look positively lovely with Logan's new textures applied to them. And these new textures naturally extend to the interiors as well, with what rather looks like granite or marble floors with a sort of cozy pink colouring, along with obviously new textures for the walls, ceilings, and wooden second levels, as you can see here in the Shadenhall bookshop. And naturally, these are just some really lovely textures that look great in game, much like Logan's other works, and they do a great job updating the game to have a more of that modern look about it, and I definitely recommend checking out this texture replacer package. Finally, for our underrated mod of the week this week, we have Falls Watch, a gorge-side cabin with a gorgeous view by Elfie Person. And this mod adds a lovely cliffside home across from one of Vanilla Oblivion's more scenic vistas, a gorge with a nice natural waterfall, and the house is just perfectly situated to catch a beautiful view of the Imperial City in the background, along with all those very scenic mountains that surround Cyrodiil. And it's a sort of humble woodsland-like cabin out in the wilderness near a number of dungeons and other points of interest. Inside you'll find a cramped but lovely and extremely detailed home with small display areas, a roaring fire with a few good chairs to just sort of take in the flames, and also a small bar area that's just kind of tucked in the back here. And upstairs you'll find a small dining room area with more display cases lining the walls, and a small study area complete with altars of spellmaking and enchanting, which are very convenient obviously if you're a mage type character or just want to do some spells or enchant some items. And there's a bit more display space area with a desk, and of course you'll find a cozy bedroom with a master bed and some suits of armor decorating the wall back here. And overall this is just a very cozy home, and one I'd recommend if you're on the market for a sort of smaller property and not a large estate. And anyway, that wraps up all the mods I have for you today, and I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's the first episode, so it might be a bit rough. And just leave any feedback you guys feel might be appropriate, like suggestions you have for improvement in future episodes. And I'll try to take those suggestions under advisement. And if you guys did like this video, do please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in 2 weeks with another set of Oblivion mods for your viewing pleasure.